Hola, it's Rachel from Wait Que, your Spanglish podcast de confianza. When we started this podcast, I had no idea how much work went into it. Recording, editing, designing logos, managing socials. Each day brought a new challenge. Starting something from scratch is exciting, pero it can also be very overwhelming. That's why I wish I had something like Shopify back then. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and it's also perfect for anyone getting started. Build your online store with Shopify's professional templates, and let their AI tools help write descriptions, polish photos, and generate headlines. Shopify's got your back with inventory, shipping, returns, and all the not-so-glamorous parts of running a business. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your site. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/sonoro. Go to shopify.com/sonoro for more information.
Sonoro. On this episode of Tamarindo, we sit down with Andrea Vidaurre, Peruvian-American climate justice organizer, co-founder of the People's Collective for Environmental Justice, and 2024 Goldman Environmental Prize winner, to explore how community-led activism is transforming environmental policy in California and beyond.
Welcome to Tamarindo Podcast, hosted by me, Brenda Gonzalez, a fitness coach, political nerd, and nonprofit capacity builder.
And me, Delcy Sandoval, a Guatemalan-American licensed therapist and passionate creativity advocate. Together, we're here to uplift our community through powerful conversations with changemakers, creatives, and healers.
Each week on the pod, we talk politics, culture, and personal development. Listeners call Tamarindo the Advocacy and Self-Love Podcast. Vámonos! Let's start the show.
Hello, Tamarindo listeners. Hello, Brenda.
Hey, y'all. We took a little bit of a break, and the timing was perfect, right? Because I think a lot of us are needing all kinds of support and all kinds of breaks and all kinds of just checking in. Obviously, we all know that there's been a lot going on. Delcy, what are some of the things that are on your mind about what's been going on?
Hi. You know what? I have to say, Brenda, this has been a very challenging time, an extremely challenging time for all of us, for the community, for me personally. It's one of those things where it's hard to access some of the old or the ways that I have coped in the past. You know, like it doesn't feel, I almost feel, I don't know if it's guilt is the right word, but I almost feel like I'm not able to look away because it feels like a privilege to look away. I don't know how else to say that. And so it's been hard to limit the access to information. So a lot of what's going on with the raids, you know, we'll get into it and we'll talk more about military presence here in Los Angeles. But it has been a really heavy kind of time. I don't know if you feel that too.
Yes, absolutely. I during the break, and this is an example of it. I mean, and we've talked about it already for our listeners and anybody that follows our social. You all know that this is what's on our mind. We're really concerned with everything that's going on and the rise of fascism, and like just the news has been. There's a reason why we're all feeling very anxious and scared and really concerned for our community, because our community is literally under attack and all of our rights are being rolled back and things are looking really terrible, really, really grim. But I'll give you an example of how I'm feeling. I got to do something that normally I would have been so excited to do. As you all know, during the break, I got to spend some time in New York City. One of the highlights of my time there was being able to go see one of my favorite podcasts, which is Risk, a storytelling podcast. So actually going to a live recording, because they do these live events, live storytelling events. And one of the things they do is they have performers, but they also randomly pick someone from the audience. It wasn't so random because I'm currently taking a class with the host from Risk. So I think he specifically picked me. So I got to tell a story. Perform a story live in front of an audience. And normally I would have been like, this is incredible. And while I did feel that, I also just have this numbness, right? There's this numbness in the background of every joyful experience, because it does feel like someone has died, because our rights have died. What has died too is sort of like security, right? I felt always very secure living in the United States, very secure in the foundations of this country. Even though I, like all of us, very aware of the opportunities to make the country better, I didn't realize how fragile our democracy and our security, quote unquote security, was, because it is gone now. So that's sort of what's in the background, and that really colors everything, because it's hard to feel joyful. It's really been heavy, even in the most joyful of circumstances.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, and congratulations for, being able to participate in something so cool in New York. I have to say, I feel very similarly. I was telling you earlier that I went to the Hollywood Bowl to watch John Fogerty, who is the lead singer of Creedence Clearwater Revival.
I love it.
He's turning 80, and, I've always been a big CCR fan. I went with my parents, and what was interesting is when I got there, the thoughts I was having, I was like looking around for ICE agents. And the more crowds I saw, the more I was looking around for danger. And I mentioned to someone like, oh, I don't know where my ID is. Like, I just started having like a lot of anxiety around being there. And the person I was with said, oh, don't worry, they won't be here. And I said, why wouldn't they be here? And the response was, oh, because they're targeting Latinos. But it was such a, it was
casual remark.
Casual remark, and no shade to the person that I was with, because I think they were just kind of trying to make me feel at ease. But I said something like, do you hear what you just said? Like, they are, first of all, like, you're assuming I'm not here. I'm here. I like CCR. Latinos like CCR. And secondly, like, what do you mean? Like, we're just all comfortable saying that we know that this federal agency is targeting an entire group of people in this country, and so I shouldn't worry. And it made me angry, and then I had a hard time kind of shaking it off and feeling comfortable, like being present in that space. I didn't like how that felt.
I mean, I think what you're getting at, because obviously we are all feeling the heaviness for the reasons we just described, but it adds to the sadness to see the lack of empathy, right? To see that the people that are outraged are the same people that have been outraged, are the same people that have been warning of this. I've seen maybe a little bit of growth in the outrage, but you would think that you would see more, right? That you would think that there would be. So that kind of makes the heaviness that much more weighted.
Yes, and I don't want it to become normalized for us either, for our community either. And I have to just make one comment. I talked last week on the last show about how much I admired people being kind of vulnerable and sharing like emotional things on their shows, because that's difficult for me. And so I want to do that now and kind of push myself a little bit, because I want to say that, the other day it was like a Saturday morning, and I woke up to the quote, to the tweet or the X post or whatever it was from Laura Loomer regarding the alligators, right? And I don't even know if I want to repeat it here, but she essentially alluded to this idea that Latinos, 65 million Latinos could be
or should be fed to the alligators. Like someone is literally calling for that.
Yes, and the way it was written, as an advisor, as a person who's a public figure, as a person who has really risen in the ranks, or whatever you want to say about this person, to say something like that in such a public forum, as either, people are saying it was a joke, it wasn't a joke, it doesn't matter. When I saw it and I read it, I cried, and I don't know that I had that kind of reaction before.
Yeah. Yeah. To think that we share this planet with people that think this way, and that we're under a regime that actually rewards that sort of thinking. The reason she's risen is because of that sort of thinking. So, yeah.
Right. But I think it was so it was painful. And I think that's an important thing to talk about here, is that I think I always discuss these things from a place of anger, or from a place of deep contentment, or maybe from a place of political activism. But I'd like to just talk about, how much pain this community is going through, all of us, and things like that are just such triggers, like the fact that I know our community, I know us, I know how hard we work, I know who we are. And to have somebody say something like that, it was a lot. So it has been, a tough time.
Yeah. I mean, we're all feeling it. And the idea that this is potentially going to, it's going to get worse, because the funding for ICE has exploded. So we can expect more of this. And it really does paint a very dire picture. So we all know we're feeling a lot of helplessness. And like you mentioned, maybe some of the things the tools we might have are not as effective as we wish. But even still, even with that, effective. What are some things that have helped you just take a little bit of a break from it? What are some of the things in your toolkit when you do need to ground yourself and center?
Well, I think something that's really important is limiting my access to a lot of this information, right? And I'm not talking about totally looking away, but there is a line that I know that I've crossed sometimes. So I can tell you with the bill, the big, beautiful bill, I was crossing that line. I needed to read everything. I needed to hear all the things. I was repeating a lot of content, and there comes a point at which I realized, okay, at this point, this is massively unhealthy for me, and I need to limit what I'm understanding here. And so I talked a little bit with my loved ones about what it looks like to be informed versus what it looks like to kind of obsess over this and allow the fear to take hold. And so I've kind of established for myself, am I informed? Did I read an article? Do I feel like I have enough information? Now I'm done. Now I'm done. And so I think that has been something that has been really helpful. And then also just being really vocal and communicative, which for me is new, because, and I don't know if this is a podcaster thing, which Brenda, maybe you can tell me, but as a podcaster, I'm so used to putting it out into the ether, just kind of saying it to a microphone, or maybe saying it to you. But that kind of makes it so that I'm quiet with my friends and family.
Yeah, that sounds relatable.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I feel like lately I've been doing more of outreaching to people and saying, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How are you coping? I'm feeling this way, and having more dialogue with people around me about what's going on and how I'm feeling, and dialogue that goes beyond, hey, ICE is here in this, corner of this and this. I'm going far beyond that and saying if I'm here for you, you're here for me, and making sure that I understand and they understand that this is a real community. It's not just an online community. Like, we're actually here, present with one another physically. What about you, Brenda? How are you coping?
Yeah, I mean, in that exact example, I think, friend of the pod, friend of both of ours is, Danny, who's been a guest on this podcast, who's a therapist, and who also, like us, has been posting and is connected to, rapid response groups, and is volunteering and is donating and is very active. And she's a therapist, so I know that she's helping a lot of people navigate their feelings, but then she herself is also having to carry this. So we've been sort of checking in on each other, and we did recently feel, both of us, well enough to be like, okay, I think I can be in a joyful space that with community. So we did get to go to an event at Nativo, and it was all like cumbias and like being with community, hanging out with other people that are just as upset. And the extra bonus was that the Mexico-USA game was on, and thankfully Mexico won, which we so needed that for our poor hearts. And so, but that's like an example of like we throughout this whole thing, we've been kind of checking in on each other, and then we were able to be physically near each other and just acknowledge like, hey, these are difficult times, but we're going to allow ourselves just for this moment to experience this joy with our community, with watching our Latin American team beat the USA that was very healing and very necessary. So that's been really helpful. But I'll also point to something else, because I think it could feel good to just feel like you're taking action in some way, shape, or form. So, of course, one of the very, very easy ways to take action is to donate, right? Donate whatever you're able to there's so many different groups. Chirla has been on the front lines supporting folks. There's also been a fund for street vendors, because we've seen the stories, right? We've seen many examples of carts just being abandoned because either people ran away or, unfortunately, they've been picked up just at their place of work, where nowhere feels safe. And so people that maybe weren't even picked up, they've been staying home. Anybody that's been in LA has noticed that the streets are emptier. Some people are still going out there, and every time I see someone, I'm like, oh my God, and I'm like terrified for them. I've been seeing a lot of street vendors. So you all know street vendors are very vulnerable. So there's a fund you all can donate that's going to provide some support, including resources for groceries, maybe help with the rent, whatever these folks might need. At least a little bit of support, because it's been over a month now that they've had to think about whether it's safe to go outside of their apartment. Like, that is where we are right now. So that's a very vulnerable group of people. And I want to invite our listeners to come to an event that Tamarindo is collaborating on. It's called Yoga and Mindful Walk. It's going to be at the LA State Historic Park on July 23rd at 6 p.m. And we are inviting folks to donate whatever amount, and all of those proceeds will go to a fund that's going to help street vendors. Our goal is to raise $500. We're halfway there. So I hope that folks are able to pitch in a little bit. And even the nature of the event, it's to acknowledge what we're feeling. So we're going to do a little bit of guided yoga, a little bit of meditation. The gal that I'm collaborating with, her name is Dr. Anne Renaud, and she is not only a yoga teacher, but she is a psychologist. So we're going to get some real good yoga and real good support, and I'll help guide a conversation so that we could just be with each other and check in with each other. So if that calls to you, please come. It's, again, July 23rd at 6 p.m. We'll put the information in the links for this episode so you all can join us. And yeah, so think about doing something like that. If you've got a special skill that could maybe provide some sort of relief for folks, think about that. That's something else that you could do. Of course, there's showing up at protests if you feel safe enough to do that. Calling your representatives, even the ones that, here's the thing, and I'm guilty of this because my reps, all of them are great. I'm so lucky, right? I live in, literally all of my representatives are incredible. So maybe I should just call them to say, hey, keep it up, But especially if you're in those places where you're in, where sadly your representatives are Republicans and they're on the other side, anytime that you can, just call and voice your concern whenever they're, like, for example, with the big piece of shit bill. I know that a lot of people were calling. So anyways, we've given you so many examples of ways that you can take action, take care of yourself, and be in community. And more than anything, we wanted to acknowledge that this is really heavy stuff. This is unknown territory for us. And we don't know what's ahead of us, right? It could be worse. Probably will get worse.
Yeah, and I want to say that, listening to the show and being a part of the Tamarindo community, like, that really is a very special thing that we acknowledge, and we're so thankful that we have built this community and that you are here with us. And this show we continue to make for you and for us. So I'm excited that you're here, that you're listening, that you're giving yourself this time. And one of the things that's helpful too is really hearing other people do things that you think you can't do, that things that are extraordinary, right? Things that are difficult in difficult circumstances, maybe a little bit of a different topic, but just as difficult to navigate. And so it kind of takes me into today's episode, because I felt really empowered by this conversation. Today, we had the opportunity to interview Andrea Vidaurre. And if you don't know who Andrea Vidaurre is, she is a powerhouse fighting for climate change, protecting communities. She focuses a lot on climate justice and collective power. And we'll talk a lot about how her cultural identity took her there, and the way that she's been able to make really big changes happen in industries that you can't imagine making change in right now, in such a hyper-capitalist existence. So I am grateful for the time we spent with her, and I can't wait for you to hear it.
I am so glad to welcome Andrea Vidaurre to Tamarindo. How you doing, Andrea?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's really great to have you here. I'm so excited about our conversation. I would love for you to start by setting the groundwork for the audience. Share a little bit about who you are, where you grew up, and what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Andrea. I use she, her pronouns. I was born and raised in the Inland Empire, which is in Southern California. We're like about an hour east of LA. We're like suburban, semi-rural communities out there. And I work on environmental justice work in the Inland Empire. And I've dedicated like almost the last 10 years to that.
Yes, let's talk more about the Inland Empire. For folks that aren't aware, or for people who live nearby and have never really been, this is a region that's been deeply impacted by pollution. Tell me a little bit about what you witnessed growing up and sort of why that led you to environmental justice.
Yeah, so the Inland Empire, along with like some of the parts of like East LA and South LA and Long Beach, and then also a bunch of other like portside and inland portside communities across the US, we've been seeing an expansion of the logistics or freight system for the past couple decades. That means like really seeing the build out of more freeways, more trucks, more rail yards, more airports, a bunch of stuff that moves cargo for the entire country, really, right? Like these communities are how we have the things in our stores. This is how we have things when we order online. Like it's kind of these communities that have their neighborhoods have faced such an impact for that to happen, especially with like next day delivery. Like that didn't happen out of nowhere. Like you had to see this explosion of warehouses and trucks for that to happen. And I grew up in a community called Fontana, in an area that was slowly getting industrialized as I was growing up, but you really saw full industrialization as we got older. And not just in Fontana, but all over. I lived in Riverside for a bit, which is really close to Moreno Valley, where you saw one of the largest warehouses in the world be presented. It's like 40 million square feet. Like people say it's like 40 Disneylands of warehousing. You're talking like 10,000 trucks a day coming in.
Wow.
To just that one facility. So we have a lot of land, right? We're really, it's really beautiful. We have a lot of open land, a lot of hills you can climb on. And that's really been targeted by the industry. And so, with all of those trucks and airplanes and trains, you get a lot of air pollution. And so that's how I got involved, was just like starting to connect the dots about how the neighborhood was changing, how the air quality was getting worse, and then learning really air quality affects us really deeply. Like the closer you live to these sources of pollution, the more likely you are to have asthma or cancer or any other respiratory issue. And so that kind of connection, realizing that, this could cause less of a lifespan for some people, was really what got me involved. And especially thinking about how kids, pregnant people, and elders are those most impacted by air pollution. It just seems so unfair, right? It's like happening without their consent, right? Their life cut short is happening without their consent. And so, yeah, all those dots being connected got me involved.
I'm so impacted by hearing you say this, Andrea, because clearly this is something that's personal to you, and that you're thinking on a larger scale is personal to our community, right? But how does one go from that, connecting those dots, to actually jumping in and doing something about it? Because at this point, you've been called one of the most influential people in climate justice today. How do you even start? How did you start with policy, with organizing? How did that happen?
That's a good question. Well, one, I was definitely brought in by people who had been doing this work before me, people who had also been brought in by others to connect those dots. And I think it was also just like will on myself to be like, I'm going to go volunteer with my local environmental justice organization. I'm going to go put my time in. And the first thing they made me do was to go knock on doors and canvass and do that really scary thing at one point, which is like, let me knock on a stranger's door and introduce myself and talk about our issues, which at the time when I was out of college, I started doing. It was kind of a big deal for me. Like it was pretty hard. And now I'm like, feel super comfortable. I can go knock on a door anywhere. But back then it was a lot. And I think that's experience for a lot of people is like, how do I get started? How do I do this thing that I've never done before? And I think it really is just going in. There are so many organizations and groups and mutual aid groups that have been fostering this kind of leadership. And I was thankful that folks brought me in when I was connecting these dots and taught me these skills about community organizing. And then for myself, I was really interested in kind of like, what is like the policy making behind this? Because this stuff is happening, like these decisions aren't just made one day to the next. These decisions are being made in rooms without us. They're being made in rooms that we've never been taught to access or engage, right? Like our city council meetings, our planning commission meetings, whatever. That's not something I grew up doing or listening to. That's not something I was taught in high school or college. I really learned this through people in the community. And so I think I just got really interested, started researching more. There are so many people in our community that have been doing this for a long time that I leaned on. That's how I got involved and started kind of unpacking like, oh man, these decisions were being made in like the 90s to like industrialize all these corridors of communities, right? And with the help of like, connecting all our resources and working with students at universities and working with community members involved, I feel like we've created a lot of research around how this particular issue is impacting the Latino community very specifically in the IE. And it's also impacting like the Black community as well, right? We were able to like put these demographics next to each other and really see like it is more likely if you're Latino to be living next to a warehouse or a freeway or an airport or whatever. And that kind of stuff, I think is we've been able to engage a lot of people in our community, get involved in, to the point where I feel like there are so many people that are involved around like anti-logistics work and just saying like, we need something else. We need something different. We need something safer for our communities. And so, yeah, that was my journey. Definitely was brought in. And I think it also just took a lot of interest and curiosity.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about this picture that you're painting about how this industry affects people in everyday life. So for those who maybe aren't familiar with the way that the logistics industry works, what might it look like on a day-to-day basis when you're talking about something on this grand of a scale, kind of living in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're living in it, you feel it, right? Like you feel the hundreds of trucks, big diesel, big rigs that are driving by, right? The noise of it, the noise of the trains where you can't really even hear yourself think, the constant airplanes flying over, right? Spewing pollution. But even for folks that don't live right next to this stuff, I mean, I think most people, maybe in Southern California in general, can see that like we have an increasing air pollution problem. We had really bad air pollution in California for a really long time, went down, and now it's going back up again because so much of this is running on fossil fuels and off of and off of diesel. And diesel is a known carcinogen. So we know that, can lead to all these terrible health issues. And so some people are so personally affected by that. And living here can mean, you're on call for an asthma attack, or you have to use allergy medicines every day, or make sure you don't forget to put on your air filter, because if not, you're going to be really sick that day. Those are kind of things some people are growing up with, right? And air pollution is affecting everybody. I mean, here in SoCal, and honestly across a lot of the major cities in the US, we have high levels of air pollution problems, right? And it's kind of like the silent killer. You don't see it, but it is tasking your body. And for students growing up here, it can really affect them, like their learning capabilities and how they perform in school. In the past, we've worked with a lot of high school students that have shared their stories about having to run a track marathon with their inhaler in their hand, right? And the fact that put them at a disadvantage to the other team coming into town, right? Just little things like that, but that are really big for anyone living in areas that are really impacted by this industry.
Yeah, I feel really connected to what you're saying, just personally, right? As somebody that lives with asthma, as somebody that kind of grew up in these neighborhoods as well. I remember when I was older, being pulled over by a police officer and him telling me that I had made a U-turn in an industrial zone. And I said, well, no, that's impossible. This isn't an industrial zone because I live here. So this is a residential area because these are all homes, and I can see right here, there's a house and another, and this is residential. And he said, no, this is an industrial zone. And he was right. It was an industrial zone. And I didn't know that because I had grown up there my whole life. I didn't realize, I had never seen what it looked like for it to not be an industrial zone. I was so used to living near trains and, endless freeways. And so I think it wasn't until I got older that I came to realize that they were aware it was a residential area and had kind of rezoned it around me as I had been there. And so raising awareness becomes really, really important. And for that reason, I'd like to ask you, for people who are not from the Inland Empire, who are not in California listening to this, why is it so important for them to be aware of what is happening in California? How does that impact the rest of the country?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And your story was really hit home, because you're right. You normalize these things so much that you don't realize oh yeah, maybe I am living in a place that's being industrialized before me. And you're right. Sometimes you don't even know that the home that you bought was rezoned without you knowing. And now you're in industrial land and you can't even build an ADU in the back, or, there's this kind of practice. It happens all the time. It's kind of like a new form of redlining, right? It's a way of really targeting certain communities out of wealth and health. And so I think it's important for communities everywhere to kind of know about what's going on, because we are living in the Amazonification of our consumer system, right? There's never been a moment in time where we can get something faster than we can now. And just like everything else, we've normalized it. We've normalized that I can get something this afternoon if I really wanted to, right? And these have huge impacts on people and really on the planet. And I think it's really important for us to think about how the full story isn't folks' consumption. I do think it's important for people to actually take score. How am I contributing to this? How can I more so invest in my local economy? How can I more so invest in local entrepreneurs? And how can I try to localize my stuff? Because that's really going to make a huge impact.
Hey Tamarindo fam, we've got something special for all our travel lovers out there. Our friends at Alma Explores, a Latina-owned boutique travel company that curates super thoughtful small group adventures, are inviting you to join their amazing Dia de Muertos trip, October 26th through November 2nd. But there are only 3 spots left, and this year it's not just one destination. Alma Explores is taking you to both Mexico City and Morelia. You'll experience the heart of the tradition, colorful ofrendas, candlelit cemeteries, visits to indigenous communities, and yes, all the pan de muerto and tamales you can handle. To get the details, go to almaexplores.com. There are payment plans available, so make sure you get there and snag your seat today. And if you're dreaming of something a little farther out, Alma's next big trip is to Vietnam and Cambodia in March of 2026. We're talking floating markets, ancient temples, street food heaven, and the soul-expanding kind of travel that she is known for. Whether you want to join a group trip or plan something custom and private, check out almaexplores.com. Seriously, go explore. Your next adventure is waiting.
But then also, like, we're also being force-fed this kind of industry, right? Who wants to build out this thing on something that we know is really harmful. So, for example, right, our train systems here use like 50, 60-year-old engines to move stuff. When in other parts of the world, in Europe, in Mexico, in Asia, you're moving things off of electric locomotives, right? You're moving things off of overhead catenary line. It's all electric, it's zero emission. You don't have to worry about the emissions coming from it. But in this country, because oil and gas is so, put up on a pedestal, right? And not held accountable, you still have them using really old technology for no reason, right? Because these are very profitable industries that could be investing in cleaner technology that would be safer for everybody around them. And so that's what I think is like even more important than thinking about like our personal habits, is also like these companies in our communities, these companies that the government supports, these companies that the government gives money to. How are we making sure that they're doing everything that they can to keep their operations safe, right? I also think about just like trucking. Like trucking is going through a massive change in the industry on like from fossil fuels and diesel off to electric, and it's a transition that's slowly happening. But you'll see in places like Europe, in South America, right, the goals to get to zero emission trucks are way faster than they are here, right? And that's a conscious decision by a lot of corporations, right? And so that piece I think is really important for us to think about, because it does impact everybody. When we think about climate change, a lot of the emissions in the U.S. are coming from transportation. So when we're kind of feeding into this like next day Shopify thing, it is contributing to climate change. And sometimes we don't connect the dots enough that this is part of kind of the issue here that we need to reduce emissions on, right? Like the US being one of the largest emitter countries in the world, right? It is like a huge responsibility for us to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure these corporations reduce their emissions, because the climate crisis is happening. There are communities that are being affected now, especially in the global South, who have done nothing to contribute to climate change, but are being the most affected. And so, that's why I think it's important. It's like a global issue. You don't think about it, but our daily lives here in the U.S. have a lot to do with the footprint that climate change has happened.
And then I feel like now you've really set the stage and we understand what the issues are. I'd love for us to talk about, what it is that we're doing about this, because you co-founded the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. What does this group do and how did it begin?
Yeah, I co-founded an organization called the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. And it was just an idea, like many other people have, of like, let's create, an organization, a group that can, better our communities. That was really the whole thing behind it. And so me and a couple of other, residents and people that work out here in the IE, the Inland Empire, we decided to start this thing and see what would happen, right? We wanted an org where we could educate about what's going on, where we could, fight for the things that we need, and like build community like along the way. And so, yeah, we've been really successful. We're a flatline structure. We've got a pretty good group now, and we've been able to really be involved in different cities and bring those resources in. So it's been really great to see, and through that organization, right, and a lot of other organizations involved, we've been able to help pass like really important rules, right, that are helping clean up the air, that are helping transition to a cleaner environment.
Now let's talk about some of these, because you've had these huge policy wins with the in-use locomotive rule and the advanced clean fleet rule. Can you tell us a little bit about what these regulations actually do and why they're so groundbreaking?
Yeah, so they were huge because I think they really were finally a movement from the government that have like finally listened or been pressured enough to listen to frontline communities' demands that they've had for years. Because this fight against, the pollution from trains and trucks and ports has started decades ago by organizations like the Impact Project and other organizations here in SoCal. And so, their work of saying we need zero emissions before the technology even existed, it started a long time ago. And so, to see these rules happen, I think was a big deal. To see the state, want to regulate an industry that had been so highly unregulated was important. Of course, what's unfortunate now is that, those policies, although passed in California, were not passed by the federal government. And right now with the Trump administration, it's most likely not going to happen. And so there seems to feel like a little bit of a stall on this front. But I think regardless, the impact that these rules had on saying like, this is the future we have to go in is still happening. And it's like still going to happen, right? This idea that we have to get off of fossil fuels in the transportation sector is happening no matter what. And regardless of a rule or not, right, there are communities across the state and across the country who are still going to continue fighting for it. So, yeah, it was a huge win, though, but still to see how it's going to get implemented.
Let's talk a little bit more about that piece. You talked about community voices kind of playing a part in these victories. Tell me a little bit about that. And if you're a member of a community, you want to get involved, like how does that play out?
So I think something we try to do is try to bring folks that are most impacted to these decision-making places, right? I was just listening to a woman on TikTok the other day. I think she's from Sierra Leone, talking about how, wars are made in like policy making, right? Like big decisions in our world are made in these policy making tables, and these like people's lives are decided in these like government halls and government places, right? And a lot of times they're not made for us. They're never really made for folks. But how is it that you push yourself in there and make sure that policy is being made with those most affected in the room and a part of it, right? Not just in the room, but like just talking about it, informing it. Because something that I've learned from, I think, the environmental justice community very early on is that folks are experts. Like you're an expert. Everyone's an expert if you've lived it. Like nobody can deny your lived experience about the impacts, about what you want to see, about how it affects you, right? Like, we can have all the science on the statistics and, all this research, which is equally as important, but also this like lived anecdote is just as important. And so that idea of like, you're an expert, anybody living in these front lines are experts, is what I think I want people to know and feel, that you don't need to have like some career in it or some degree in it. Like you can just get involved based on your own experience and what you want to see. And so from there, I think it's always important like to find spaces that align with you and your values, and trying to find spaces where people are doing this. And if it doesn't exist, create your own with your friends, which is what I feel like we did, right? Find folks that feel the same way and want to do something good in your community, and find them and start something, right? But I also think like we do not lack like elder leadership in our movements for wanting something better. And so I think we can tap into that everywhere.
I'd love to go that direction because language is so important. We talk so much about climate change, but you focus on the language around climate justice. What is the difference there? You're alluding to it now. Why does that language matter?
Yeah, it's important because, everybody is going to feel the impacts of climate change, right? But there are going to be some communities that feel it more and faster and are feeling it now, who probably have the least contribution to, greenhouse gas emissions, but yet they're the ones that are going to feel it the most. For example, right, last year I was lucky enough to go to the Marshall Islands, which are some islands in Micronesia. And these islands if temperature still keeps going up every year, like it is, the islands could be underwater by 2050. These are indigenous islands. These are folks that are connected to the land on a very spiritual and emotional level. Their island could be going underwater by 2050, and they have they have some of the least contributions to like the emissions for climate change, right? And so we went over there, and they have so much to teach us about what climate justice means, right? And so much about how they're preparing like nature-based solutions around the island, you know, that align with their values, that align with their spirituality. And we have a lot to learn from them. And so that's where the justice piece is that sometimes we don't think to learn from those that are most impacted, but that's where like so much of the solutions are going to be that benefit the most amount of people, right? Sometimes when we're trying to think about solutions at the top or something, they leave people out. That's why I think it's really important to make solutions from those most affected, because I think most people there, you'll have the most amount of people benefit from it. And that's what climate justice is, right? It's goes beyond just thinking about this as like a atmospheric problem, but more of like a problem around justice, capitalism, and racism, which have a lot to do with why there are certain communities that are more impacted than others.
Andrea, listening to you talking about kind of the scope and what's at stake here, right? I think a lot of us are in that place where you just feel exhausted, right? There's so much going on, and you're doing your part, but there's this exhaustion. And I'd love to hear from you. How do you stay grounded and keep pushing forward in a system that's slow moving, that's resistant to change?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's not easy every day. But I think something that keeps me going is like we build these organizations, we build these groups around like our community, right? Which our community has fun and feels joy and is here to learn from each other and build with each other, right? Not just to fight, right? To fight against the bad. It's also about like creating the good. And I feel like a lot of the folks in the movement and in our organization are able to do that, right? Are able to show how you can have fun and build joy and build relationships, right? Because that's at the crux of all of this. Like we live in a society that wants us to be so individualized, doesn't want us to talk, it doesn't want us to connect, right? Wants us to just work and, you know, focus on your own home. And really, I feel like what keeps me going is that I feel like there's so many spaces now that are calling for people to just build community, for like podcasts like these, for you to like get inspired and learn about how people are talking and connecting and exchanging ideas. Like that kind of stuff keeps me going, because if I only thought about all the bad, then I think we'd get really tired by tomorrow. But kind of thinking that this is like a long-term fight, I think helps me through it.
As we're winding down here to the end, I'd love to talk about activating our audience, because I'm inspired. I'm sure people listening are feeling inspired. What do you hope that people listening kind of take away from this? And are there any organizations, campaigns, and movements that you'd like to connect people to?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for sure, follow our organization, you know, the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. We're on all social media. But then outside of that, I think if folks want to tap into more organizations across the country, the Moving Forward Network is a network that we're a part of, that I think is really important to uplift, because they've been doing some work around this as well. And then I would also just say, like, go local. Like there is so much to learn in your local communities, that going local takes you global before you know it. And so I would just say also just like get involved in any way that you can locally. To any efforts that call for you. I think right now it's like we want to do it all, and it's really hard to do it all. So like what is your piece, right? What is the thing that like calls you? I think is what you gotta go towards.
Andrea, thank you so much for sharing time and space with us here at Tamarindo. It's been amazing.
All right, and we're back. What an incredible conversation with Andrea Vidaurre. I hope that you enjoyed it. And we're going to transition right into our rapid fire questions. Let's talk about la basura, Brenda. So much to throw in la basura. What would you like to throw this week?
Everything you've listed. Take it away, Delcy, because ditto.
let's talk about what happened this week. So we had high visibility with military personnel, federal operations. There was a federal operation that essentially sent military personnel to MacArthur Park in Los Angeles. To see the footage of this, to have been there, I can't even imagine. Just so I can set the scene for you. We're talking about a park that in the middle of the day really wasn't that frequented. There weren't a lot of people there, but the people that were there were like summer camps, with children and people using the space for recreation. If you are not from Los Angeles, let me tell you, Los Angeles is a little bit different the way we handle our parks than, let's say, in New York City, that is just filled with people. That is not really the case in a lot of the parks. They're really niche. And in this particular day, the people who were using the park were primarily campers, right? And we have Humvees, we have folks deployed on foot, horseback, other tactical vehicles, dozens of ICE agents, all showing up, highly visibly carrying massive weapons. And nobody knew that they were coming. There seemed to be no heads up for any of the people in the area. We're not sure why they were there. And it was clearly a political show of intimidation and a show of power. And if you think about that, if you think about a US city having the federal militia essentially show up, what does that mean for our democracy, for our rights, for our liberty, for our ability to exist peacefully in a city without any crimes being committed in that space?
Yeah, they didn't arrest a single person. It was totally a parade. It was just, again, a show of force. It's really, like, this is what I find so destabilizing. So, like, the house of cards has crumbled, to think that the president is vilifying a city because, and this is, and this is so funny to be quoting this because it comes from a movie that sort of makes fun of North Korea, but here we are being the exact same things. They hate us because they ain't us, okay? They hate us because they ain't us. Because Los Angeles is an example of what happens when you have people from all over the world working together, supporting one another. Generally everything works great in the city. Yes, we have our opportunities to do better when it has to do with housing and homelessness. Of course, we're not perfect, but we're a economic force. And it's because of immigrants. It's because of the multiracial collaboration and solidarity that this city is. And so we are the picture of everything that Trump and his cronies hate. So of course he's vilifying us. And this is just one example, and it's a parade. It was just for the gram, literally for the gram. These brave men and women, quote unquote, who have way better things to do than literally walk across a park for the gram. That's literally what this was. So yeah, all of that goes to La Basura. Shout out to Mayor Bass, who got them to leave. And shout out to Governor Newsom. Governor, that's a good name for him. Governor Newsom, who called it what this is. Like, this is a show. This is nada más. It's just a show. But it does stand for something. It stands for what's happening, which is that this little president of ours has a vendetta against Los Angeles, and it is crazy. It's wild. So yeah, basura to all of that.
Yeah, and also, really important to note, because you have heard for years the Republican Party kind of running on this idea of fiscal conservatism, right? And thinking about how we're going to better manage the economy, todo eso. Pero think about the amount of money, resources that were spent in sending military personnel to Los Angeles to essentially do nothing.
And this whole the whole ICE operation, all of it, none of it is fiscally responsible, and the economy is suffering. The fact that we've pulled so many people from the workforce, probably going to pull. I mean, I've already heard a lot of reports of people not showing up to work in the fields, so crops being lost. Like we haven't even really seen. We've seen just the beginning of the impact of all of this, and not fiscally responsible at all. All right. We've got through those. What are the matracas?
All right. The matraca for me, I just want to say, and there have been other big moments in news in the past couple of days. And as you have probably heard, there were devastating floods in Texas that have impacted incredible amounts of people. About 100 people have been lost, lots of children, particularly girls that were in a camp, an overnight camp. And so I've been watching a lot of footage of just how quickly they were able to mobilize a lot of the rescue efforts. And I just want to talk about the rescue efforts, right? Because I know that there's a lot around this and what went wrong and why this happened. But in terms of being able to rescue the amount of people that they were able to find, just a big shout out to people out there, the local firefighters, EMTs, National Rescue Crews, community volunteers, lots of Latinos there. I also want to say that President Sheinbaum sent over some personnel to support as well. With everything that's going on, Mexico was still able to support Texas in this way. And so I just want to say shout out, because it is not an easy thing to work in crisis response and to work in trauma response. I can't imagine the things that these folks are finding and seeing. And so I just want to say matracas to them and the fact that they're doing this for these folks.
A really devastating story. I just can't imagine what the parents must be feeling. I mean, this is just horrendous. And I know, as you all know, we record many, many days before you all hear this. So hopefully that's the end of the loss of life, which is still just crazy that it was 100 people, maybe more. So devastating news. But glad that it's a matraca to celebrate the people that are responding there. And there has been a lot of heroic stories of even like one particular swimmer saving, I think 65 people, and a couple of, women from Mexico that were there to be camp counselors that kept a lot of little girls safe. So there's been a lot of heroic examples. So love to hear all of that. My matraca is more personal. I just want to say thank you to my good friends that have literally opened their doors for me to have this awesome summer. So when I went to New York, a really good friend of mine opened her doors to Jeff and I. So we stayed at her place, and that was wonderful to experience living in Brooklyn. And I'm leaving for Chicago tomorrow. Another friend has allowed us to stay at her place. And it's just like, wow, like, thank you all. Thank you all. And you're all welcome to wherever I can host you, anywhere in Mexico. I can't wait to be with y'all. And shout out to friends that do that open their doors. It's been really, really nice.
I love that. That's wonderful. And it's also like so nice to have this season for that, right? Like a season to kind of rejuvenate and be in all of these places in the summer. Yes. I love it. All right, inspiración, let's talk about it. I will start. I am so inspired, as you all know. I really love nature, and I really love the idea of like the blend between the urban and the natural world. So I'm really excited because the Seine River has officially been opened. So this is in Paris. It is now officially open for public swimming. I want you to know that it has been over 100 years since people were able to swim in the Seine River in Paris. And that was because they had runoff from sewage. There was all of this like toxic runoff from like rainwater and other like gutters and things like that. And so the city didn't really prioritize taking care of some of these urban rivers, right? And so people saw them, but they weren't accessible. And so after the Olympics happened, there was this big push to clean the river and to create these systems that could make it operational for people to use. And so they finally opened it, and people have been going, they've been swimming, they've been using the space. And it kind of reunites this kind of urban environment with its natural original landscape. So this is the Seine River. I'm really excited, and I hope that other cities kind of see this and see what's possible. And I have heard that there are like 4 or 5 other cities that have started their own projects too. So really cool to see. And next time I go, I'm going to look.
Yes, guess who? Maybe this is just chisme, but guess who's going to get to do that real soon? Also, friends of the pod. So Ileana and Danny are going together to Paris. And this is one of the things that Danny is hoping to do, is to go swim in the Seine River. Super cool. Well, my inspiración is LA Taco. This is a local publication, online publication, and online platform that originally started to talk about tacos, and now they are on the front lines. They have done some excellent reporting on the ICE raids and everything that's going on. They were just featured today on NPR for their incredible reporting. They were breaking news so quickly that they pivoted to online first for a minute. I should say social media first for a minute there. And they've been doing these recaps at the end of the day just to keep the community informed. So just shout out to LA Taco. Just shout out to any of these small online publications, especially when there's a lot of Latinos involved in this project. I know it's not Latino owned, but it's definitely Latino led, and a lot of the writers are Latinos. So yay to LA Taco. And I've been a longtime reader, sometimes donor. I've sometimes had to shift my giving to other places. And I know that Eva Longoria just gave them a really nice check. So that's great. So if you're looking for somewhere to donate, this is another great place to donate, is to LA Taco. So yay.
Yes, shout out to LA Taco. All right, everyone, that has been the show. It's such a pleasure to have been here with you all. Please take care of yourselves. Saludos a la familia.
Pon tu suéter, and we'll hear you on the next one. I guess you'll hear us. It's really what's happening. We won't hear you, but you'll hear us.
Take care, everyone.
Tamarindo Podcast is Brenda Gonzalez and Delcy Sandoval. We are also the show's executive producers. Jeff Ricars wrote our theme song. Sonoro Media's Karina Riverol provides production support, and Cliva Torres edits our episodes for YouTube. The best way to support our work is to rate and review Tamarindo or share an episode with a friend. Get in touch with us at tamarindopodcast.com.
Hola, it's Rachel from Wait Que, your Spanglish podcast de confianza. When we started this podcast, I had no idea how much work went into it. Recording, editing, designing logos, managing socials. Each day brought a new challenge. Starting something from scratch is exciting, pero it can also be very overwhelming. That's why I wish I had something like Shopify back then. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and it's also perfect for anyone getting started. Build your online store with Shopify's professional templates, and let their AI tools help write descriptions, polish photos, and generate headlines. Shopify's got your back with inventory, shipping, returns, and all the not-so-glamorous parts of running a business. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your site. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/sonoro. Go to shopify.com/sonoro for more information.